Good morning, everyone. So, when we got asked to speak today, I was just so inspired by Bill and Jill Jensen that I thought perhaps we should go right along with the theme and do like a morning talk show. So, welcome to Morning Talks with the Box. In all seriousness though, we hope that as we talk today, that you'll be able to hear a bit of our stories and you'll be able to hear a bit of the story of Peter and just learning about what it really means to live out this life with Christ, what it means to be a fisher of men, not just a fisherman. So the past 4 weeks we've been talking about absolute salvation. And as we look to transition into talking about absolute discipleship, the two really can't be separated. The process of discipleship begins before a person is saved and doesn't end until a person passes from this world. And if you are saved, you can't really live a life walking with Christ unless you're being discipled and turning around to disciple others. Or at least that's the way it should be. But far too often, there is some sort of disconnect that happens in the process. We lack in being discipled, and we stop short of discipling others. We avoid close relationships because we're afraid of having to be real. We're afraid of what speaking into someone else's life will look like. We're afraid of offending them. We're afraid of being offended. We begin to focus in on ourselves instead of others. We become distracted by the cares of the world, and we get busy and we have our own priorities. And the joy that we once knew of being absolutely saved begins to fade as we forget what Christ did for us. Over the past several weeks, we've talked about how God took a fisherman like Peter and turned him into a fisher of men. Peter found absolute salvation, and because of that, he became a disciple who discipled others. He no longer was fishing to make a living, but he was fishing for people who needed to meet the Jesus that he knew. While salvation and discipleship went hand in hand in Peter's life, it wasn't always pretty or easy. Peter made a lot of mistakes along the way and wasn't always the best fisher of men. But he learned. And our guess is that that might be the case in your lives as well, because we know that's the case in our lives. Discipleship is messy. It's the story of our lives. And each of us has a different story, but we have a common hero, and that's Jesus. So today, as we talk about Peter's life and our lives, we hope you hear the story of Christ and the hope that he has for you. Each of us is on a journey, and we believe that God wants to challenge us all today to take a step further in being a fisher of men that knows him. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for the way that you pursued us and you are pursuing us, and the way that you invite us into doing that in other people's lives. So I pray that as we talk today, just that you would speak to us about the people who you sent our way to share the love of Christ with us, and the people that you put into our lives today to reach out to, whether it be our friends, our family, our coworkers, our neighbors, all those people, God, you love, and you want to use us to reach them. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. So I don't think I introduced myself, but I'm Sarah Bach, and Pastor Nee. And so we're talking about the story of Peter. And the story of Peter picks up in Matthew 4. It says, "While walking by the Sea of Galilee, Jesus saw two brothers, Simon, who was called Peter, and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And he said to them, 'Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men.' Immediately they left their nets and followed him. And going on from there, Jesus saw two other brothers, James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, in the boat with Zebedee their father, mending their nets. And he called them. Immediately they left the boat and their father and followed him." So as you can see, Peter was a fisherman. He was just a common fisherman, but Jesus saw something more. He saw that there was more to Peter's life and that God had a plan for him. And so he called him into that and said, "I want to make you He put that vision out there for Peter to see. And as you can see, there was other people involved in Peter's story, other people walking alongside him and a part of his life. So similarly to Peter, Jesus has called me out and pursued me. I grew up as a pastor's kid. I was going to a church where it was very small. There was probably 40 people, no one else my age, except this one kid who really didn't care anything about Jesus and just sat in the back drawing pictures. And so discipleship wasn't really a thing in my life. Everyone knew that I was a pastor's kid and thought that I was good, but honestly, I wore a mask a lot of the time. No one knew the hurts of my life, my fears, my doubts, my insecurities. I was silently suffering in the church pew. No one was really pursuing me, and I wasn't pursuing anyone else. I was most definitely not fishing for men because I didn't even know what that looked like, because I hadn't experienced it. I was doing my own thing, trying to make my own plans, trying to find a good life, whatever that was. But it was through a difficult life situation and painful times that I came to really find Christ in high school. And then I started to see the people that God had been and was sending in my life to go fishing for me. People like John Siles, people like Joe Bushy. They were pursuing me and hoping to disciple me. After that, I went to college and I had a great group of Christian friends that really challenged me to actually read my Bible for the first time and to live out my faith. People like Kate, Adrian, Amber. When I graduated from college, I started to feel a big missing piece in my life because I didn't have those friends there in my day-to-day. I started to feel lonely again. I knew that there was still a lot left to learn about God, and I wanted to help others find Him. So my cousin, Rachel Nash, who was Rachel Cooper at the time, was getting married, and she had just recently started following Christ, maybe for the last year or so. And so when she invited me down for the wedding, she wasn't just inviting me down for the wedding, she was also fishing for me. And she told me about her church and that there was this opportunity that I could move in with a bunch of girls from the church. So I decided to sit down with her pastor, who was Pastor Bob and Valerie. So I sat down at their kitchen table and just started unloading all the junk of my life, all my hurts, fears, worries, problems in my family. It just all came out. And they sat there and they listened to me. They really listened to me and wanted to hear about everything. And that was the first time that somebody had done that for me. That they had really dug deep into who I was and wanted to hear about those things. And they told me that there was an opportunity for me, that God had more for me. And so I believed it, and I packed my bags, and I moved from New York down to New Jersey, and moved into this house with all these girls from the church. And so, as I did it, it was a very idealistic thing. Oh, I'm going to follow God, and I'm going to move into this house with all these girls, and everything's going to be just wonderful. But it became real very quick as we rubbed noses and had to fight over who got the shower, and had messy people and people who were a lot cleaner than me and got irritated, or had to figure out all these different things. And so it was a little bit harder than I thought, but it was just what God had planned for me. The girls that I had lived with started to invest in my life, and I invested in theirs. It was messy, we made mistakes, we hurt each other, we had to forgive each other, and we had to find Christ together. But those girls and the people around me at that time taught me what it was to really go fishing for people. Going beyond your comfort zone, asking the hard questions, getting to know each other, staying up late, giving of myself, forgiving each other, and repeating that again and again and again.
So a little of my story is I got saved early on at like 8 years old. My parents were bringing me to church and everything, but I really didn't have a lot of discipleship. Same type of thing, kind of was in a small church and had no one really going after me. So growing up, I struggled a lot with fear and doubt. Walking with Jesus for me was a list of like do's and don'ts. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, do this, do this, do this. had like a revival. I had a pretty good growing up years, but just had a lot of fear and doubt, and just didn't really understand my faith. It was just a lot of it was up here. Then when I was 18, one of my friends from my soccer team, he really like reached out to me, and I fell in love with Jesus, and we got on mission, and we started fishing for people at our high school. And then I started asking the questions like, okay, what the heck am I supposed to do with my life? Now I graduated from high school, wasn't sure what I was supposed to do. I ended up getting in contact with one of my former youth leaders from my youth group, and she said, hey, I think you got a voice in these kids' lives. Why don't you become a youth leader? So I was like, I had fun in youth group. I enjoyed it. I was like, yeah, sure. So I participated for that year in worship and with leading games and different things, Bible studies and such. And then I just was getting discipled. And then after about a year, another youth leader comes up to me, and out of the blue, she asked me, she's like, hey, Nate, have you ever considered being a pastor? And I was like, oh, pastor, like, whoa, what do I say about this? And I just, told her how I felt. I was like, no, I actually really don't like public speaking. I don't think of myself as that type of leader. She was like, you sound a lot like Moses. Those sound like excuses. And she said, have you prayed about it? The old question the pastors ask you, or your leader asks you, have you prayed about it? And I was like, no. She was like, why don't you pray about it and read the Bible about Moses? So I went to God with it. I read in the Word about Moses, and I just surrendered. And then, she followed up with me and said, oh, so what did God tell you? And I was like, I don't know, but I know I just got to be open to His will and throw out the excuses. And so through a journey of discipleship, I became convinced that I was called to be a pastor with the vision casting, just as Jesus had called Peter and said, you're going to become a fisher of men. That lady, that youth leader, she called me out and said, what about being a pastor? This might be God's call in your life. And then again and again, I had that. I ended up going to Nyack, moving from California all the way to New York, and running into all these people at school and getting a lot of encouragement, but I still had those struggles of fear and doubt, and am I enough? Do I have what it takes? All that type of stuff. So I was like, I don't know what kind of pastor I'm supposed to be. I took another little baby step, and I heard about this internship, and I signed up with these guys from Jersey Shore, Building on the Rock, and then next thing you know, I'm living with a bunch of guys, and I'm learning what it really means to fish for people, to bring God's love to people. So you'll hear about a little more of that. So with Peter's journey, we're going to go to Luke 10 and just see how he got into the game, how he got into the call of God, being a fisher of men. So Luke 10, verse 1 and 2, it says, after this, the Lord appointed 72 others. So it wasn't just Peter and 12, but a whole bunch of people got into the game and into the call. He appointed 72 others and sent them on ahead of him, 2 by 2, into every town and place where he himself was about to go. And Jesus said to them, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest field. So you remember a few months ago we were talking about this, and we were saying the big point being like the harvest is few. I mean, the workers are few. Sometimes we're like, oh man, there's so many people out there, but there's not enough Christians. But really what Jesus was trying to say is the workers are few, but that's because we need more people to sign up. The workers are you. The workers are us. And so Peter, he got in the game. He was a part of this group. And just thinking about the journey he was on, I mean, he must have went out and was like thinking of like, okay, what is my family going to think? I'm with Jesus, and he's radical, and he's not like a traditional rabbi or a religious teacher. He's out and about, and he's doing miracles. he says all these hard teachings. You know, he also must have thought, like, am I going to measure up? Like, Jesus did all these miracles, casted out demons, healed people. He knew what he was talking about, and he could speak well. And he must have thought some of those things. He must have thought, like, am I going to be rejected? Are people going to receive me well? I'm going out into all these towns. But Peter did it anyhow. He pushed all those excuses aside, and he went out encouraged. And then after the 72 came back, Jesus debriefed them on what happened. And they learned. They learned their mistakes. They learned that it wasn't about a method or formula. And that's what counted, is that they were in the game and that they were willing to learn from Jesus. And I think of my journey after I went to Nyack, and I went on this journey to be a pastor. I didn't really know what that meant. I'm at Nyack, and I was in the Army Reserves, and so I was doing part-time duty with the Army, and all of a sudden I get orders that I'm called to go to war, to go to Iraq, and that the orders say like a year and a half. And so I'm like angry at God. I'm like, I've just left California all the way to New York to pursue this call, and now you got me going to the Middle East, and I might get myself killed, and I'm afraid, and just saying, well, how could this really be happening? Like, what's going on? And then all of a sudden, I have my Nyack community, my friends, my teachers, pointing me to the call of God and saying, listen, God's got a bigger plan than what you think. You're not just serving your country. You're going to be serving God. He's going to put you in touch with people that pastors and that we couldn't reach. And he did. I got put in with a mix of people from New York City, Jamaicans, people from Texas, Boston, Puerto Ricans, all types of people. 30 of us, we went and we got over to Kuwait, and I was fired up. I was stoked because when I was at Nyack before I left, they had like a commission service for me. They all put their hands on me, and they said they prayed for me, and I had a going away party. And so I made it my goal when I got overseas to share Christ with everyone in my unit and to have those conversations. And I even took this online evangelism class, and I was like, oh, I got these really cool methods and questions that are going to help me share my faith. And so I used this method that said it was going to guarantee success with sharing my faith. And it was great, and it was awesome. And I saw some people receive it, but there were a lot of people who were just kind of like staring at me like they were a deer staring at headlights and stuff. And so I came back from that, and then ended up taking this internship with Building on the Rock, and I still had all these methods and ways of sharing my faith. And then I ran into Building on the Rock, and they really knew that it wasn't about getting a person to say a prayer or getting them to hear a message or about methods, but it was about really being led by God and sharing the gospel and fishing for people. And it was at that point that I ended up moving in with a bunch of guys. We needed help. We wanted to grow in our call. And I ended up moving in with, a lot of you guys know Pastor Joe. He was looking to be a pastor. He was looking to follow Jesus. And then there's a bunch of guys coming to us from America's Keswick who had addiction problems and stuff. And so Pastor Bob didn't really know how to disciple us himself. And he's like, you guys, let's just get a Bible, and you guys just start ministering to one another. I'll help you out, but listen, I'm not the Savior. You guys got to get a hold of Jesus. And so that's what we did. I grew a lot. I got in a lot of conflict, and God did some amazing things. We had this one guy who was coming to the church. His mom was dragging him and his brothers to church, and we knew he had a drug issue. And so me and Pastor Joe and a few of us in the house, we started reaching out to him, and he was all nice and put the mask on and everything. But then things got bad, and then he started calling out to the church saying, Pastor Bob, and hey, I need help. And so we ended up meeting this guy at his hotel, and we said, hey, we could help you out. We're here for you. We'll lay our lives down for you, but you're gonna have to take some steps. And so he took the step, he moved in with us. He really didn't know Jesus that much, but then he received Christ, and he got set free from addiction and became a whole new person. And this guy you know nowadays is Pastor Dave. And then this happened again, and some guys didn't have to move into the house. It wasn't about a method. We had this guy coming around who was like brokenhearted, and he was around our age, and he was hanging out with us. We were trying to invite him to go bowling with us, and we knew a little bit about his situation, that his fiance dumped him and such. And he was coming over and studying the Bible with us, hanging out with us a bunch, but he didn't want to move in. We were okay with that. We just wanted to give him Jesus. But then one day he ended up calling Pastor Bob, and Pastor Bob's like, hey, it's not about me. Hey, you guys call this guy. And so one of the guys from our house ended up calling him, and he received Christ. And his life changed, and then he wanted to hang out with us more and be a part of everything. And this guy you know nowadays is Pastor Scott. He wanted to be once a rapper and make millions, but God flipped his world upside down, and now he's from rapper to pastor, huh? And so this is what God does. He makes us fishers of men, and he starts by just getting us close to him.
So, as I said, I grew up going to church, and so I tried to invite people out to like youth group and stuff like that, but they might have come once or twice, but they never really fit. They weren't ever really excited about God or anything like that. And so during that season, I just felt like a big failure because I heard about Jesus, but I could never really get anybody else to believe in Jesus, and it just felt like I always got rejected. Always felt like a weirdo for sharing my faith. And so coming out of that